This is a fascinating story. You may have read about this in Rolling Stone. You might have seen it in the Netflix series Dirty Money. It's about the HSBC money laundering investigation from several years back. As many of you may remember, it ended up with the largest single fine for an institution for money laundering. We're going to hear today from the individual who blew the whistle. He doesn't like being called a whistleblower, but in fact, he blew the whistle on this. Saw what was going on the inside, brought it to the attention of the CIA and the government, and the investigation ensued. He's going to come up here and tell his story. I think the best way to introduce him is to show you this. Ladies and gentlemen, he's come here from Pennsylvania. He's come here to tell his story, to give you insights into the HSBC money laundering. Please welcome the CEO of Tactical Rabbit, Mr. Everett Stern. Everett, please join us. Reset the timer here, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate
Everett, welcome to Seattle.
Thank you, Tom.
Pleasure to have you here. That will advance your
Thank you very
slides.
much. Thank you guys for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here and to be able to share the story. And what I first want to say off the bat is I'm probably your biggest breach and threat you can possibly imagine. I mean, my breach and insider stealing of information, led to, and it's funny because I was watching that poll and it said malicious threat. And according to the bank, I was a malicious threat. And my evidence led to the largest fine ever being levied against a bank, $1.92 billion. And what I want to make clear, though, is that before we even begin this presentation, there's a difference between me being a breach or an insider threat and stealing information from the bank than somebody doing it for their own personal gain or somebody doing it as a classic breach would be viewed. What I did was for national security reasons, and we're going to get into all this in the actual story, but we're talking about billions of dollars in terrorist and drug cartel financing that I helped stop. And it's a very serious situation. And what I want to do is kind of give an overview and explain what happened in the HSBC scandal. Because in case you didn't see the Netflix movie or read about me in Rolling Stone or a number of other articles, I want to kind of explain the entire situation. But it's important that we understand immediately that the world's a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because who look on and do nothing. And that's a very important concept I want to drill home today, because there were thousands of people who worked at this bank with me who saw the exact same things that I did. I'm not some genius or anything that figured this crazy stuff out. And they looked on and did nothing. And this has actually happened throughout history, and that's how major atrocities have occurred. But what I want to talk about mainly in this presentation is the ethics and the morals and the sacrifice and what happened behind the HSBC scandal and what Netflix doesn't talk about and what you have to risk in order to do the right thing, and to make sure when that time comes, when you have to do the right thing, is that you actually pull the trigger and do it. And I'm not saying I'm some angel or some guy that's on the complete up and up. Believe me, I have my personal faults as well. Just, you can ask my parents. Believe me, they'll testify to that fact. But what I do know is that when the time came for me to do the right thing, and I did the right thing, I was punished very harshly for it. And that's something I want to really explain in this presentation and show you guys just how harshly I was punished. And the question I want you guys to ask yourselves at the end is it still worth it? Because at the end of the day, of the HSBC scandal, nobody went to jail. They got fined $1.92 billion, which was 5 weeks of their profit, but nobody went to jail. So what was the point of all this? And that's something we kind of have to ask ourselves. And in the question and answering period, we need to kind of bring this up because it's kind of a moral question. Because I ask myself quite often, was it worth it? And to me, the answer is yes, but to a lot of you, the answer might be no. But basically, what's critical is the challenges facing compliance officers today is that compliance officers have to do where they have to help benefit the bank, but at the same or the financial institution or MSB, whatever they're working for, and at the same time they have to try to stop criminal activity, which could hurt the bank. So there's a huge conflict of interest. And again, when to actually take that whistleblowing step, and again, I don't like to consider myself a whistleblower, and I'll explain why, but when to actually escalate something, when do you actually do that? And I'm going to explain how. And again, we all know the negatives of someone blowing the whistle on you or doing criminal activity or money laundering. I mean, this is just standard stuff here. But let's talk about the actual HSBC scandal. So what happened was you had HSBC Bank, which was given a cease and desist order in 2010. And the cease and desist order was given by the Treasury Department, and it was given to HSBC Bank, which is one of the world's largest banks, especially in correspondent banking. And correspondent banking, as you know, is when one bank has to get money from another bank to another bank, and they kind of act as the world's brokers for banks. So for instance, if someone at Wells Fargo wants to get money to someone in Gambia at Standard Chartered Bank, how are they going to do it? There's no link between Wells Fargo and Standard Chartered in Gambia, so they're going to have to go through HSBC, and HSBC will facilitate those funds. So HSBC was in a world's position to be the bankers for the terrorists and the drug cartels, and what the government put the cease and desist order on was because they were witnessing an unbelievable amount of terrorist financing and drug cartel financing, and the government said, you have 1 year to put a stop to this, or we're going to shut you down and revoke your banking charter. And I was brought in 2010 to help fix the problem at HSBC Bank. And what I'm going to explain to you now is how HSBC tried fixing the problem, because what they did as a result was actually defraud the United States government and trick them into and showing them, oh wow, we have this huge anti-money laundering compliance program, when the whole thing was a sham. There was no anti-money laundering program. And this is very important. And what's important to mention here, because this has been mentioned into the news, and we'll get into this later, but I was a candidate for the clandestine service before I joined HSBC. So I was in business school in 2010, and I was rejected from the CIA before I joined HSBC Bank. I was not planted at HSBC, has been assumed by some media organizations and by some people. But what ended up happening was I immediately figured out what HSBC was doing. I was hired as an anti-money laundering compliance officer, and HSBC hired me because I did not know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about compliance. I didn't know anything about money laundering. There were maybe 15 compliance officers in the whole department when I showed up. 15 compliance officers, that was it. And it was in this shady building in Newcastle, Delaware. It wasn't even in a banking facility or anything. It was just in this shopping mall. And I remember the walls were half painted, cubicles were half set up. I mean, you want to talk about a boiler room type operation, this was it. And I'll never forget, half of the building was filled with debt collectors from the HSBC credit card division, hundreds of these people. And they completely outmatched the amount of anti-money laundering compliance officers. And eventually what HSBC ended up doing was firing all of those debt collectors and then rehiring them the next day as anti-money laundering compliance officers and had them clearing transactions. I swear to God, you can't make this up. They even admit, and again, anything I say in this presentation that sounds outrageous, if you look, HSBC admitted to everything that I'm saying in the Senate hearings. They admitted to everything. So this is not all made up stuff from me making allegations. This is all factual evidence. So 3 weeks in, I passed in information to the CIA. I went back to my old recruiter. So I started in October. On November 10th, I remember I was laying in bed and I was trying to decide whether or not to send this email to the CIA recruiter, because I knew if I did it, it was going to change my life forever. And it was going to alter the course of things. I just knew it was going to be very bad, for me at least. Because you have to understand, I just started this great job, which I thought was a great job. I was making $55K a year, which was a lot of money to me back then, still a lot of money. And I was right out of business school. And my parents were proud of me. I had a banking job. Everything was going great. I had my own apartment, my own car. You know, so for me to screw this up, but I'll tell you what I saw that day that kind of pushed me over the edge. So on the OFAC sanctions list, right, you have different names that are mentioned. So OFAC is part of the Treasury Department where they list names of people we can and cannot do business with. And they list these names and you're supposed to put them into a wire filter. And the banks have this wire filter. So for instance, there's a company called Tajco. So it's spelled T-A-J-C-O, okay? And it's a front for Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is a terrorist organization operating out of Lebanon. And they also operate these supermarket chains out of Africa. And Tajco was listed in the OFAC sanctions. And I saw HSBC basically handed me the keys to the kingdom. Because when I came in, I wanted to learn as much as possible. I went to the library, I got anti-money laundering books, and they put me in charge of Middle Eastern transactions, which was amazing 3 weeks in, and I had no idea what I was doing. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to approve everything. So once I got a hold of these transactions, I ran it through the system, and I saw that there were hundreds upon millions of dollars going to Tajco. And I didn't understand how this was happening if it was in the wire filter. Because if it's in the wire filter, those wires are supposed to be stopped. So it didn't make sense to me. And again, I'm not a rocket science, I'm not an anti-money laundering expert, but I'm not a schmuck either. And when I saw this, it didn't make sense. So I looked carefully at the wire filter and I saw these dots and I saw these dashes in the wire filter. So instead of Tajco being spelled T-A-J-C-O, it was spelled T-A-J.co or T-A-J-CO. And it didn't match with what was on the OFAC sanctions list, and that's what allowed the payments to go through. Because what the HSBC wire filtering system required was that there be an exact match for it to stop the payments. So this is how HSBC was laundering money for terrorists and drug cartels. They were criminally manipulating the wire filter. And the FBI later called this stripping the payments. And I figured this out, and I saw this. And I knew I had to say something or do something because people were going to get killed. Because I don't know if you were aware of this, but Hezbollah is responsible for making those IEDs, those improvised explosive devices, which goes on the side of the roads of Afghanistan and Iraq, which when you see that vet with his arm blown off, or hear of that wife who had his husband killed by some roadside bomb, those were made by Hezbollah. And what people don't understand, and what people don't understand in a lot of these fraud and breach summits, is that white-collar crime, it's blood money, and people get killed as a result of it. And bombs, bullets, gas to burn American flags, all these things cost money. And if we cut off the money supply, we'll win the war. And for some reason, people haven't figured that out yet. And that's a whole nother issue. But I passed the email to the CIA, and I did this consistently for over a year. So this is why I don't view myself as a whistleblower. I don't view myself as a spy either, but I view myself as somebody who consistently passed information to the CIA, and I did not go to the FBI actually until much later. And I did not go to the FBI until much later because the person running HSBC hired the person to run the department was a former counterintelligence FBI agent. Why you would pick a former counterintelligence FBI agent to run a compliance department, I will never know. But their job, I don't know if you know this, is to hunt spies. That's what they do. And for the record, when this person sees this speech on YouTube, I think they should go back to the academy because I got past their counterintelligence for over a year. But that's besides the point. But anyways, so I think that HSBC was setting up a system designed to defraud the United States government. And the reason for this is because they were making a fortune doing it. Billions upon billions of dollars. And we're talking the Zeta drug cartel, the Sinaloa drug cartel. 500,000 Americans die a year from drugs. We see what's going on with the opioid crisis and with the heroin and the fentanyl. And we have a bank that's giving these people money, and we're allowing that to happen. And I remember laying in bed, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I said I had to send this email. And it did alter the course of my life, and we'll get into it. But again, money laundering, I'm not going to get into the details of exactly what money laundering is, but really what the basics or the foundations is you're concealing the source of the funds. And that's what terrorists and drug cartels try to do, right? Because they make money criminally, and they have to get it back into the banking system. And again, on your own time, you can Google what money laundering is. But what's important here is that you understand what correspondent banking is, and that how correspondent banking has become a conduit for these terrorists and drug cartels to launch war against the United States of America. And I'm not saying this in a conspiracy theory way. I'm saying it because Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, all these terrorist organizations throughout the world, they all want the US dollar. I mean, think about it, right? They all want the US dollar because that's the ultimate currency in the drug and terrorist world. The US dollar is worth the most. So they're using our own money against us, and that's why they want to go through HSBC Bank USA to try to get those US dollars. And again, all this is proven in the US Senate reports. What I'm saying is not new. So let's talk about how HSBC kind of defrauded the US government. One way was that they created these different types of alerts, and they created a new type of banking software called Norcom. I don't want to get into the absolute details of this. You can talk to me outside. I'm more than happy to explain. But if we're talking about technology that's outside, HSBC designed a technology to clear a massive amounts of alerts. So for instance, if you have a focal entity, okay, and if you're a compliance officer, you know what I'm talking about, but let's say Tom Field, the person who's up here, is the focal entity, and he's sending money to half the room here. What HSBC did was they would come up with these rules, and their banking software would allow me to vet Tom Field. So if Tom had a halfway decent looking website, then I could clear not only him, but also approve all the wiring transactions for half the room. Does that make any sense? No. But HSBC would come up with their own rules and regulations on how to do this. And what's amazing is the entire time I worked there, I never saw one regulator. Not one regulator. So anyways, it was a very frustrating experience for me. And also, not to mention, I want to be very clear on this. It's not like I just went to the CIA off the bat and started passing information. No. I went to management numerous times and tried to escalate alerts, trying to escalate situations, trying to prevent, trying to get SARs to be filed. A SAR is a suspicious activity report. And a SAR has to be filed, and that is what gets the financial intelligence to the FBI, to the CIA. Banks are supposed to be writing SARs. But HSBC didn't want SARs to be written because SARs take time to write. And if you're writing a SAR, that means you're not clearing an alert. And one of the big problems, and part of this 2010 cease and desist order, was that HSBC had a huge backlog of these alerts and had to clear them. So they were focused solely on clearing alerts. But one thing they did, which was very dangerous, was that they decided to pay their compliance officers extra money to clear more alerts. So they created an incentive-based compliance program, which is insane. I mean, anyone in here could understand that's absolutely nuts. And then, not only that, they were giving promotions, taking people out to lunch, the catered dinners. I mean, I'm telling you, what was going on with this is unbelievable. I'm telling you, watch the Netflix movie, you'll be in shock. And then they kept putting alerts on. They didn't want alerts to be filed as SARs, so they kept putting them on watch. Then they would put them on watch again. And then what they did was, to really clear alerts and to make SARs go even faster, was they opened up centers in Sri Lanka and India. Now, this is where things got really bad and became a very serious national security risk. And you can guess why. So you have US transactions, and this is going on even today, by the way. So you have US transactions being approved by Indians and Sri Lankans, nothing against those countries, but US transactions, and then they're filing SARs that are going to the US government. So we're having foreign countries providing us intelligence? How does that make any sense? So you can understand, this is why I had to involve much higher level parties, because this was a very serious situation. And again, I want to make very clear to all of you here, especially because I know there's HSBC employees in the crowd. You guys know it's still going on. And these centers, I know for a fact, are still open. So let's talk about, so Saudi British Bank. So Saudi British Bank was generating the most amount of alerts out of any bank we were dealing with. And that's where some of the 9/11 hijackers were coming from. I mean, we're talking serious terrorists were coming from out of this bank. So what was HSBC's solution? Because we were getting inundated with alerts. The solution? We can trust their reps. I don't know how, but we can trust them. So we can start clearing Saudi British Bank alerts. This was in an actual email that I gave to the FBI and the CIA. So again, and by the way, if you are going to commit fraud and treason against the United States of America, try not to put things in writing and send them to your staff, because then guys like me who are committing that malicious breach will take that information and will steal it. So, and by the way, I had to be very careful, and talking from a cyber standpoint, HSBC had very secure cyber systems. And I had to get past those cyber systems, or I could get flagged or alerted. So one thing I did was I had me take home my laptop computer. I got a key, and I would take notes from the laptop computer. And yeah, I had all kinds of. I don't want to give out too many ways because I don't want to close out HSBC's ways of preventing other guys like me from taking information from them. But anyways, also quality assurance for the alerts. There was no quality assurance. Nobody was checking to see if the job we were doing. And by the way, all they wanted in an alert or an when I say an alert, it's like an investigation. All they wanted was a website to be posted or us running a name through WorldCheck, but they didn't care if we actually found a legitimate name or something. They just wanted us to PDF it and show that we actually just tried running the search. because we knew the regulators weren't going to check. So this is, again, another way they got past the U.S. government. How is the U.S. government going to come in and check hundreds upon thousands of these alerts and these investigations? They couldn't. So, again, what I want to talk about also was, we had Charbity Fruit, which I call a killer fruit company. It's a fruit company operating out of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It's still operating today. And they're financing Muslim Brotherhood out of Yemen, where they're firing rockets, by the way. I mean, this is very serious stuff. And I saw the people and the entities, the exact individuals, not just the organizations, that the money was going to. So I knew what the money was for. I even spoke with a Canadian shipping company that was trying to get bullets into Iran. I mean, it was unbelievable. So, but Tajiko was the big one, and the Tajiin family is known for, financing Hezbollah and killing Americans. And actually, Qasim Tajiin was, I believe, kidnapped by the Americans and brought back to the United States and is now sitting in federal prison not too long ago. And that was partially, I believe, based on my intelligence. The Israelis went after another brother, and then a third brother is still involved in Beirut running a construction company. But what was very interesting was that he had a Hezbollah fundraiser. And my team, I have a company I own a private intelligence agency made up of former CIA officers. And we were actually looking at photos that one of my NSA guys found of the Kardashians partying with the Tajiin brothers, helping them raise money for Hezbollah, which is fascinating. You can see the photos online, actually. And again, talking about foundations and the Gaza Strip. Also, I wrote an email to management saying that there was a compliance error and that we had to fix this. And it's a very detailed email. It was actually leaked online. You can read it. And this email, I was threatened to be fired over it. Because we could not put the word suspicious in an email. We couldn't put the word terrorist financing. There were certain things we couldn't do and put in writing because they didn't want regulators to find it. So let's talk about terrorist activity. I mean, the 9/11 Commission estimates that the plotters of the attack invested about $400 to $500K in tactical operations. That's not a lot of money. $500K is not a lot of money. And by the way, a lot of that, 130K of it, was from bank-to-bank transfers. And HSBC had a rule where you could automatically approve bank-to-bank transfers. How is that possible after 9/11? So again, people are kind of missing the point here that, again, wars cost money. And I can't emphasize this enough, and how serious this HSBC case is. And I think one thing we all have to ask ourselves is, I'm sure most of this room hasn't even heard of what I'm talking about right now. And how is that possible? I mean, I'm explaining how serious this is. I mean, yeah, Netflix did a movie, Rolling Stone. I was featured in Rolling Stone magazine, but why is this not all over the news? Why was this not all over the news? And the Senate hearings were a big deal, and it was for a period of time, but then it kind of died off and people forgot about it. And that's why it's important for me to give presentations like this so I can remind people. But now let's talk consequences. Now let's get into reality, guys. So enough about the case, enough about the facts that you can always research online. Let's talk about what Netflix didn't talk about. Let's talk about the reality of doing the right thing and what it takes and what really happened to me. Because this is what people don't know. So if you see these pictures, nobody went to jail. There was a deferred prosecution agreement. And I'll never forget, after a year and a half of spying, I was not fired from HSBC. I left on my own accord. I was not fired. And they actually paid me $27,500 to leave, because as you can see, I'm a pain in the ass. So basically, what ended up happening was that nobody went to jail. And I'll never forget, an FBI agent called me and said to me, "Everett, I'm sorry, our hands are tied, and we've reached an agreement, and nobody's going to jail. They're going to take a fine, and that's it. And you're entitled to a whistleblowing, reward, whatever. But I didn't do anything for whistleblowing reward money. That wasn't my goal. That had nothing. I didn't even know about whistleblowing reward money. It had nothing to do with it. What I was doing was for the national security of the United States, and that was it. And I sacrificed a year of my life, because if you think going into work every day, lying to people and stealing information is fun, it's not actually. And it's not a movie, and it's not a game. And when you're talking about American soldiers being killed and you being responsible for trying to stop that money from getting there, that's very serious, and it weighs heavily on your mind. And for a 25-year-old, that's a lot to take in. And I'm 34 now, so it's been a while, but at 25, it was a lot. And being a candidate for the clandestine service certainly didn't prepare me for that whatsoever. But this is the end result. And if you see this picture in the upper left-hand corner, that's my bed. That's a cot. It's a military cot. I lost everything after the HSBC scandal. Nobody would hire me. I was all over the news. I was the whistleblower who, and people thought at the time HSBC didn't admit to things. There was still an investigation. People thought, oh, this guy's a nut. He's just saying all these things. It was very difficult. And I lost everything. I had no money. I was eating peanut butter and jelly and hot dogs because I couldn't afford anything. So that was my bed. I slept in a cot. And that desk, that plastic desk in the lower right-hand corner, that's where I wrote the intelligence report, HSBC Financing Terrorism. I bought that desk at Walmart for $15. And that's how that intelligence report, that's what actually ended up going to the senators and going to people. But again, the CIA would obviously, there was no more interaction whatsoever. And there was no help. And also, you have to understand, when this became public, I named people and individuals that are not friendly to me anymore. Okay? You just have to understand that I didn't just name groups and say, oh, Hezbollah, money was going to Hezbollah. No. I disrupted entire organizations and people and their Russian mobsters. I mean, I pissed off a serious amount of people. And it was, I have to admit, it was a little nerve-wracking. And the death threats were coming in. I'm not gonna lie. So, but I had nothing. And I'll never forget, though, at that deferred prosecution agreement, and I figured, what was it all for? And I'm gonna be completely honest with you, something I was going to do, and I share this at my conferences, and my PR person said, don't ever share it, and I share it anyways because it's important you understand that I'm being sincere with you and the reality of this. But I remember sitting in that plastic fold-out desk with a 9mm, ready to take my own life, because I took it so personally that I failed at my mission, that I could not get somebody in jail. Because that was the message to be sent to all the banks. You want to commit treason against the United States and finance terrorism, one of you is going to go to jail. And that would have sent a powerful message. And I feel I failed. I've had people come up to me at conferences. I've had people come up to me in the street. I've given speeches and press conferences, and they say, "Oh, you're this hero. You went and you blew the whistle and did this and you did the right thing." I don't feel that way. I really don't. That's why I don't feel like I'm a whistleblower or that I did the right thing. To me, I consider myself a failure because I didn't get one of them in jail. Now, in perspective, I'm not in control of what the Department of Justice does. I can't control whether they put somebody in jail, but that's how I feel personally. I don't care about the fine. And HSBC got bonuses that year. Bonuses. So there's right and there's wrong. I mean, the dove did not fly across the courtroom on this one. And I became very confused because I was like, if you do the right thing, I thought the good guys win in the end. And I decided at that moment, before I was gonna kill myself, that I had a pet rabbit. And that's actually why my company is called Tactical Rabbit. And you can look it up online, it's called tacticalrabbit.com. But I had a pet rabbit, and I was like, who's gonna feed the rabbit? And then I didn't pull the trigger, and I said, I have to turn this around because nobody's gonna help me. So I got a job at P.F. Chang's restaurant, the Chinese restaurant. So I went from working at a Chinese bank to a Chinese restaurant. And I used to come home covered in Chinese food, and I started my company, again, on that plastic fold-out table, and I would wait tables at night and work on my company during the day. And I built my company. It took me 7 years, but I built it from nothing into a multi-million-dollar organization. And we help a lot of people. Again, you can read about Tactical Rabbit online. It's a pretty cool company. We do a lot of great things and help people. And we've been in the news a lot. And yeah, and I proved the good guys could win in the end on my own, though. I wasn't going to wait for someone to write me a lottery ticket or for the government to give me a handout. And that's where a lot of whistleblowers go wrong. They wait for this handout or for something from the government. Screw the government, they're not gonna help. I mean, again, nothing against, no disrespect against the United States government, but you have to take responsibility and just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get the job done. And that's what I had to do. And I had to rebuild things all over again. And in the end, things worked out. But I had to go through hell to do it. And it was, again, you can understand just how hard it is to do something right and then be punished for it. I mean, imagine that. And that's why I wanted to show you guys this, so you understand that when it comes time for you guys to do the right thing or something, you might have to go through this. And the question is, are you gonna do it? Or are you gonna take the easy road and just, take that 55K a year or take the 100K a year and just let the terrorists finance? And again, this is an extreme example, but I'm sure there's other examples in your life where you could either not get involved or get involved. And again, there was the founding of Tactical Rabbit, and I ran for US Senate in 2016, and I knew I was gonna lose for US Senate, by the way, and you're gonna read about this online because people make fun of me. Oh, this guy ran for US Senate in 2016. He had no shot. Of course I had no shot. I was 32 years old. I was going to win for US Senate. But I was trying to send a message because the guy who I was running against was HSBC formed a PAC, and they started buying up senators on the Senate Banking Financing Committee. And this senator was on the Senate Banking Financing Committee and was accepting money from HSBC. I couldn't allow that. So I took you can read about this in Open Secrets. I took 75K of my own money and I ran against the guy. Why not? Just to give. And I took a lot of votes away from him. We give him a hard time. I mean, give him a run for his money. So it's about the message, and that's one thing I've learned over the years. It's not so much about the consequence or the action, but the message you send to people when in your actions. And again, I'm not going to end up, probably I'm just debating the congressional run for 2020, some other things going on. But can one person make a difference? Yes. And compliance officers, of course, have that ethical duty to do so. But there was something very important that I remembered in college. My father gave me this poem. And it was this framed poem by Emerson, by success. It was the definition of success. And I even kept it framed in my cubicle at HSBC. And I remember all the other compliance officers used to make fun of me because they were like, who's this idiot in this little tiny cubicle with this giant framed success poem sitting in his cubicle? And I look it was like an elitist type thing. I'm not, that's the last thing I am, but I read that poem every day. And that's what helped me, in fact, guide my life and guide me in making the right decision and to get through and try to make a difference in the HSBC case. And I want to read you this poem, and I want you to really have this ingrained in your mind. What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. And for me, this is enough for me. So I wanted to leave you with that, and now I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I know that we have some questions. We'll have a microphone that we'll pass around to get questions as well. But we had some people that submitted questions over the app as well. I want to share some of those with you.
Sure.
One, if you encountered a similar situation again, what strategy would you implement to accelerate your success?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, there's no acceleration in this particular type of process, because you have to gather intelligence, you have to try to make a difference on the inside. It's a long haul. This HSBC was, you had to be ingrained into this for a long period of time. There's definitely no shortcut on this one.
Everett, did external auditors not notice the lack of SARS files to FinCEN?
No, that's a great question. I don't know what the auditors were doing, but if there are any auditors or if they even exist, me personally, I think auditors and regulators are an imaginary fantasy. I have never seen any or dealt with any or know of any. I know in my interviews with the FBI and the SEC and with federal prosecutors from Southern District of New York, even then I never even encountered a regulator. So.
Okay, let's take some questions from the crowd here. We don't have a microphone to pass around, so Everett, just when you get a question, let's repeat the question so we can make sure we record that as well.
Sure.
Oh, there's a microphone right there. Thank you very much. Sorry, he surprised you with that, didn't he?
I can project. Just as a retired sergeant first class from the United States Army with several combat tours, thank you for saving my troops' lives.
Oh, no,
you.
it's not, no.
Very good. There are hands up all over the room, Everett, so as you look around, you see one, we can bring the microphone right to them.
That definitely hit home. Thank you.
Good. Considering that HSBC is a global bank now based in, I guess, London, even though it is Chinese in origin, who would you have liked to seen put in jail? And
you get to choose.
Yeah. So the people who needed to go into jail was Irene Dorner, all of HSBC management, because this was a management top-down approach. The direct people who oversaw the compliance program and to bring HSBC in compliance with the cease and desist order, every single person who had a management role needed to go to jail because they were responsible. They were directly responsible. And let me just point out in that note, one of the hardest things I had to face when I was living in that 400 square foot apartment, sleeping on a cot, those people, those managers went on, like that counterintelligence agent who interviewed me, he's now the head of anti-money laundering for Capital One. And the other one is now the head for TD Bank. And the other one, they all went on to these top jobs, and it's disgusting, and nobody cares. And yeah, so anyways, to answer your question, the direct management needs to go to jail.
And my second question is, given that HSBC has been involved in several of these massive problems over the years and have been fined many times, they're still doing the same thing, right?
Yes.
What right now, I think there's a big investigation going on with Russian and other money laundering they're doing. What do you think can be done there? What would you do if you were in charge now?
Well, I can tell you right now that I am not done with HSBC yet, and I have recently, and I'll share this on camera, that I have recently interviewed again with the FBI and with federal prosecutors, and there's going to be around 2, 3, 4, and 5, because this is still going on, and they're not stopping, and I'm sorry, but allowing the financing of our enemies is not to be allowed from U.S. soil.
You got a question right over here from Kristen Judge.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's pretty emotional for me too, because I'm a similar personality to you and have found things that, or they seem to find me, that I want to help change, and I can't sit back. Do you think it's innate that we are just born this way? Because I always tell my husband, can you please have me not take on the next, big project that comes my way? And I want to encourage you to run for office, because after fighting a Walmart for 4 years as a stay-at-home mom, I became an elected official, and you could get a lot more done. So I will be donating to your campaign. Keep running.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I was born or destined to, or if these things are born or destined in people like us, I guess, or for me. I can say for me, I can't talk about other people, but I know for me, I don't feel like I was born or destined to do something, because one, I don't feel like I did something great. I really don't. Like, it's an honor to have a first sergeant thank me like that, and it touches me, and it's tremendous. But I feel like I let her troops down, so it's a different type of feeling. So I honestly I don't know, and for this particular situation. Yeah, I don't know. I just know that why? Again, this is an age-old. It's a question. Why do some people turn away when things are wrong or things are? And why do some charge into battle? Who knows? I don't know. That's a question beyond me. I don't know.
Everett, I've got a couple of follow-up questions here, and I want to share some that have been submitted via the app. One is, was there anyone who helped you, supported you, or believed in what you were attempting to accomplish?
No.
Besides the rabbit?
No, and that's what made it so hard. And in fact, my friends abandoned me. My family thought, it was a very rough, lonely, period. And as you can imagine, with that apartment, I didn't get much dates in that place. So it was definitely.
Wait, is this why you're setting up a booth out in the hall here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No. But it was definitely. No, it was a very lonely, and nobody helped me. And in fact, one of the hardest things for me was how the FBI dropped me and the CIA and everyone just kind of, this guy, they just, once they got what they wanted out of me, yep. Everyone just dropped me like a stone.
Everett, I want to point out that he will be here for the entire day. He does have a booth set out there that he can answer questions privately. He'd be happy to engage with you. There's a question we've received here I really want to share with you. I think, honestly, it's one of the most important questions I think we've ever received at one of these events before. Everett, what would you tell a high school student interested in a career in combating bank fraud?
I would say get that success poem, hang it on your wall, and read it every day. Because it's not about combating, it's one thing I've learned. It's not about, for me, I wanted to join the CIA so bad, and it's funny because it just turned out where I ended up living a CIA-type life, and not joining the CIA, but you don't go for a specific goal. You go for a specific ethical mission, and if you have the mission to make a difference, to make a significant positive difference, and help make one life breathe easier every day, your life is just going to take a course where you're just going to live a spectacular life. And that's one thing I've learned, and that's one thing that's led to so many opportunities opening up for me. I remember even with Tactical Rabbit, with my company, when we battled it out for Sweetbriar College, and I don't know if you know that battle, but we helped save a women's college stay open, and we battled the fraud that was occurring there. And again, it was just such an honor to know that we helped these women keep their college open. But to have that one mission in mind, I think if everyone in society had this one mission in mind, to have that success poem and to just make one life breathe easier. Imagine just even the minor things, Tom, what could be accomplished, how much society could go further.
Well said.
And you wouldn't even see things like HSBC even happen.
Well said. Everett, I think the crowd has thanked you. I want to thank you as well. Everett Stern.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again,